Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Ancient Epics, the place where the greatest stories of humanity come back to life. Beneath the thick canopies of the American jungles and across windswept highland valleys lie cities that once rivaled the greatest centers of the ancient world. Stone towers rose toward the heavens, plazas echoed with ritual footsteps, and calendars carved in rock measured time with a precision that still astonishes modern science. Then, in what seems like a single long breath of history, these cities fell silent. Palaces emptied. Temples were abandoned. Roads that once carried traders, pilgrims, and kings vanished beneath soil and vines. One of the most haunting facts of ancient history remains this: some of the most advanced cities in the Americas collapsed not after foreign conquest, but while their people still lived, still believed, and still watched the skies for meaning. This mystery has lingered for centuries. When Spanish chroniclers first encountered ruins deep in the forests of Mesoamerica, they found no living memory of who had built them. The stones themselves became the only witnesses. Why would societies capable of precise astronomy, monumental architecture, and complex governance allow their cities to fade back into the earth? What unseen forces, natural, political, or cosmic, could unravel worlds so carefully woven? The collapse of ancient American cities is not a single story of sudden destruction, but a slow and solemn unraveling written across centuries of drought, devotion, ambition, and silence. It is a tale of brilliance and fragility, where human civilization stood at the edge of nature's vast rhythms and learned, too late, how small even the greatest cities could be. Long before their fall, the cities of ancient America were born from an intimate relationship with the land. In the lowlands of the Maya world, dense jungles concealed limestone bedrock, thin soils, and seasonal rains. Here, city builders carved reservoirs into stone to capture water, raised terraces to tame erosion, and aligned temples with solstices and equinoxes. Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, and countless other city-states rose as sacred landscapes, where kings ruled not merely as political leaders but as mediators between earth and sky. Each monument was both a proclamation of power and a prayer carved in stone. To the west, in the highlands of central Mexico, Teotihuacan emerged as a city of astonishing scale. Its Avenue of the Dead stretched for kilometers, flanked by pyramids aligned with celestial patterns. The Pyramid of the Sun rose above a sacred cave believed to be a place of creation, where the world itself had once emerged. Tens of thousands lived within its carefully planned neighborhoods, sustained by agriculture, obsidian trade, and ritual order. No single ruler's name dominates its inscriptions. Instead, the city seems to have been governed by collective ideology, binding its people through shared cosmology rather than dynastic lineage. Farther south, Andean civilizations shaped cities along mountain spines and coastal deserts. Though separated by distance and terrain, they shared a reverence for cycles of water, of seasons, of stars. Urban life in the Americas was never detached from nature. It was a negotiation, renewed each year through ritual and labor. This delicate balance, however, carried hidden dangers. Archaeological evidence reveals that many ancient American cities grew rapidly, sometimes beyond the limits of their environments. In the Maya lowlands, pollen records and soil studies show widespread deforestation as populations expanded. Forests were cleared for fields, fuel, and construction lime, exposing fragile soils to erosion. Reservoirs filled with sediment. Wildlife retreated. At the same time, rulers continued to commission ever larger temples and monuments, each demanding vast resources and labor. The sacred calendar marched onward, even as the land beneath it weakened. Climate studies drawn from cave formations, lake sediments, and tree rings tell a sobering parallel story. Between the 8th and 10th centuries, much of Mesoamerica experienced prolonged droughts. Rainfall became unreliable. Seasonal cycles shifted. For societies dependent on maize agriculture and rain-fed systems, these changes were devastating. Inscriptions from Maya stele, once filled with celebrations of victories and divine favor, grow sparse. Dates disappear. Cities that had thrived for centuries began to fracture. The collapse was not marked by a single catastrophic moment. Instead, it unfolded as a gradual abandonment. Elites lost authority when they could no longer guarantee rain, crops, or cosmic harmony. Trade networks faltered. Conflicts increased as resources grew scarce. In some cities, evidence of hastily constructed fortifications appears, suggesting fear and instability. Temples were left unfinished, their stones still bearing the marks of tools laid down forever. Teotihuacan's fall carries its own solemn mystery. Around the 6th century, fires swept through its ceremonial core, deliberately set rather than accidental. Palaces were burned. Statues were broken. The city was not erased by an invading army, but dismantled from within. Some scholars see this as social upheaval, a rejection of elite authority by the very people who had built the city. Others interpret it as ritual closure, an intentional ending of a sacred cycle. After the fires, Teotihuacan never recovered its former power. Its population dwindled, and its immense avenues echoed only with wind. Across the Americas, cities did not vanish entirely. People endured. Communities adapted, migrated, and transformed. Yet the era of colossal urban centers tied to divine kingship was fading. The collapse reshaped belief systems as much as landscapes. Where rulers once claimed cosmic sanction, humility before nature's forces began to reassert itself. Memory turned inward, carried through oral traditions rather than stone monuments. Jungles reclaimed plazas. Roots cracked stairways aligned to the heavens. Animals nested in temples once reserved for gods. From above, the land smoothed itself, hiding centuries of humans striving beneath green silence. It would take hundreds of years before explorers and archaeologists would begin to peel back the vegetation and uncover these forgotten worlds once more. What remains today is not merely ruin but testimony. The collapse of ancient American cities speaks of extraordinary human achievement bound tightly to environmental limits and spiritual meaning. It reveals societies that understood time deeply, yet could not escape its tides. In the quiet stones and empty reservoirs lies a lesson written without words. Even the most magnificent civilizations stand within the rhythms of earth and sky, rising and falling as those rhythms allow. As the great cities thinned and quieted, the land itself became an archive of their passing. Beneath layers of soil and fallen leaves, traces of daily life endured broken pottery, worn tools, fragments of murals still carrying faded reds and blues. Archaeology reveals that collapse did not mean instant disappearance. In many regions, people remained for generations, living among the shadows of monuments built by ancestors whose names were slowly slipping into myth. The city, once a living body, became a sacred memory embedded in stone. In the Maya world, the breakdown of political authority unfolded unevenly. Some cities declined early, while others struggled on, adapting their structures and rituals. Copan, nestled in a fertile valley near the Motagua River, offers a poignant example. Once ruled by a long dynastic line whose kings recorded their reigns in exquisite hieroglyphic texts, Copan shows evidence of soil exhaustion and overcrowding in its final centuries. Skeletons from later burials reveal signs of malnutrition, suggesting that food scarcity had become chronic. The final ruler erected monuments that echoed earlier grandeur, but the inscriptions feel strained, as if tradition itself were being held together by sheer devotion. Further north, cities like Tikal endured cycles of decline and resurgence. Tikal's rulers attempted to reassert power through renewed construction and revived alliances, but the underlying pressures of climate and population weighed heavily. Reservoir systems, once marvels of hydraulic engineering, struggled to provide clean water during extended dry seasons. Algae blooms and contamination likely followed, compounding hardship. The sacred bond between kings and the rain-bringing forces of the cosmos weakened, and with it, the legitimacy of rule. Astronomy, once a source of confidence and order, became an unsettling mirror. Ancient American astronomers tracked the movements of Venus, the Sun, and the Moon with extraordinary accuracy. Venus, in particular, was associated with warfare, sacrifice, and cycles of destruction and renewal. When droughts coincided with ominous celestial events recorded in codices and inscriptions, fear may have deepened. The heavens no longer promised balance but seemed to reflect instability on earth. Rituals intensified, yet relief did not come. In central Mexico, the fall of Teotihuacan reshaped the spiritual landscape for centuries. Later cultures, including the Mexica, looked upon its ruins with awe, believing the city to be the birthplace of the gods. They did not know its true name, only that it was ancient even to them. This transformation from living metropolis to sacred ruin highlights how collapse can elevate memory into myth. Teotihuacan's decline redistributed populations across the Valley of Mexico, giving rise to new centers like Cholula and later Tenochtitlan. Collapse, in this sense, was also a dispersal of knowledge, skills, and beliefs. In the Andean regions, urban collapse followed different patterns shaped by extreme geography. Coastal cities dependent on irrigation faced devastation when El Niño events disrupted rainfall and flooded canals. Highland centers confronted colder temperatures and shifting ecological zones. Though the great Inca Empire rose later and learned from earlier civilizations, even it bore the imprint of past failures. Terracing, state-controlled food storage, and road systems represented attempts to buffer against collapse by mastering environmental variability. These innovations were born from long memories of earlier cities that had fallen when balance was lost. The psychological weight of abandonment is etched into the archaeological record. In some sites, offerings were carefully placed before departure, ceramic vessels, obsidian blades, and figurines laid into pits or sealed chambers. These acts suggest intentional closure, not panic. Leaving a city was not merely a practical decision but a spiritual one. Sacred spaces were deactivated, their power respectfully contained. In other places, however, signs of violence appear: burned buildings, scattered remains, defensive walls, evidence that scarcity bred conflict and desperation. Trade routes that once linked distant regions weakened as urban hubs declined. Jade from the Motagua Valley, obsidian from highland sources, cacao from tropical lowlands all became harder to move without centralized authority. As long-distance exchange diminished, regional identities grew stronger. Art styles shifted. Languages diverged. The grand interconnected world of classic-era cities fragmented into smaller, more localized cultures. Yet knowledge did not vanish. Agricultural practices adapted. In some regions, communities diversified crops, reducing reliance on maize alone. In others, people migrated toward more reliable water sources, abandoning ceremonial centers but preserving oral histories tied to them. Stories of ancestral cities entered mythic time, becoming places of origin, warning, or reverence rather than political reality. European arrival centuries later froze these landscapes in a moment of rediscovery. Chroniclers encountered ruins overtaken by forest and assumed sudden catastrophe, imagining vanished peoples and lost races. Modern science paints a more complex picture. Collapse was not failure alone, but transformation under pressure. It revealed both the resilience and vulnerability of societies deeply attuned to cosmic order, yet bound to fragile environments. The stones of abandoned cities continue to align with solstices. Shadows still trace ancient stairways at equinox. The sky remains unchanged, while the people who once interpreted its messages have become echoes. Collapse, in the ancient Americas, was not the end of civilization but the closing of a chapter defined by monumental urban life and divine kingship. What followed was quieter, less visible, but no less human. In this long twilight after the cities, memory endured without monuments. The land healed where forests returned and rivers shifted course. Humanity adapted once more, carrying forward lessons written in drought, fire, and silence. The rise and fall of these cities stands as a testament to brilliance shaped by belief, and to the enduring truth that even sacred stone must yield to time. As centuries passed, the abandoned cities of the ancient Americas slipped fully into the realm of silence, yet their influence continued to flow beneath the surface of history. Forests grew dense where plazas once lay open to the sun. Highland winds swept through roofless halls that had echoed with ritual chants. The land did not erase these cities. It absorbed them. Their stones became part of the earth's long memory, waiting for another age to listen. In many regions, descendants of the builders continued to live nearby, farming the same soils and honoring the same mountains and rivers. What changed was scale and meaning. Power no longer gathered so heavily in monumental centers. Authority became more dispersed, tied to community, lineage, and landscape rather than towering temples. This shift marked a profound transformation in how societies understood stability. The city as a sacred engine of cosmic order had proven vulnerable. Balance would henceforth be sought through adaptability rather than grandeur. Archaeological discoveries made in recent decades have deepened understanding of this transition. LiDAR surveys, cutting through jungle canopy with pulses of light, have revealed vast networks of causeways, terraces, and suburban settlements surrounding once famous city cores. These findings show that collapse was not simply an urban phenomenon but a reorganization of entire regions. People did not vanish. They redistributed. The monumental heart faded, but the body endured. Environmental recovery followed human withdrawal. In the Maya lowlands, pollen records show forests returning within decades after agricultural pressure eased. Biodiversity increased. Water systems stabilized as reservoirs silted naturally and wetlands regenerated. Ironically, the land healed fastest where human ambition had once reached its highest peaks. Nature's resilience stood in quiet contrast to human fragility. The memory of collapsed cities shaped later civilizations in subtle ways. Among the Maya, post-classic centers such as Mayapan were built with more modest scale and stronger defensive planning, reflecting lessons learned from instability. In central Mexico, reverence for ancient ruins influenced religious imagination, turning former political capitals into timeless sacred spaces. The past became a source of authority precisely because it was unreachable, sealed in stone and myth. Even the stars retained their ancient power. Astronomical knowledge survived through codices, oral traditions, and ritual calendars. Though fewer monuments were raised to mark celestial events, the understanding of cycles remained deeply embedded in culture. Time continued to be measured not only in years but in sacred turns of destiny. Collapse had not broken the bond between sky and earth. It had reshaped its expression. Modern excavation often reveals moments frozen in transition. A household altar left intact. Tools arranged neatly as if awaiting return. Footprints hardened in ancient floors. These details speak of decisions made with gravity and restraint. Leaving a city was not always an act of fear, but sometimes an acceptance that a chapter had ended. The city, like a living being, had reached the limits of its breath. The story of the collapse of ancient American cities resists simple judgment. It is neither a tale of inevitable doom nor a warning carved in fear. It is a layered narrative of success meeting constraint, of belief encountering climate, and of humanity negotiating its place within forces far larger than itself. These cities rose because people understood their world deeply. They fell because that understanding, though profound, could not command rain or halt drought forever. Today, visitors walk among these ruins with awe, tracing carvings worn smooth by centuries of weather. Scholars decipher glyphs and map landscapes, piecing together fragments of long lives. Yet much remains unknown. The silence of the city still holds secrets, reminding the present age that knowledge is always partial and humility remains essential. In the end, the collapse was not an erasure but a transformation of memory. The cities returned to the earth, but their lessons endure in stone alignments, agricultural innovations, and enduring cultural identities. They stand as witnesses to humanity's capacity for beauty, organization, and devotion, and to the unyielding rhythms of the natural world that cradle all civilizations. As firelight fades and the ancient tale settles into stillness, the ruins remain where they have always been, half in shadow, half in sun, waiting patiently as they have for centuries. Their story is not finished, only quiet, carried forward by those who listen with care and reverence. If these ancient voices touched your heart today, please consider subscribing to Ancient Epics and ringing the bell so you never miss the next forgotten tale. Thanks for watching.